guys, I'm Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop, and today's quilt is really special. It was designed and named after my father. He served in the National Guard, and we decided to design this for Quilts of Valor, and their mission is to cover service members and veterans touched by war with comforting and healing quilts. I can't wait to show you this quilt, so let's get started. Williams Honor is a free Fat Quarter Shop quilt pattern that we released 3 years ago, but we brought it back when we saw the American Gatherings 2 fabric collection by Primitive Gatherings because they pair together really well. The quilt is pretty big. It finishes at 63 wide by 84 high, and that meets the size requirements of Quilts of Valor to award to a veteran or a service member. If you want to learn more about Quilts of Valor and how to get involved, you can find a link to their website in our description box below. For now, let's talk about the pattern. Once you download the Williams Honor quilt pattern, it's a free pattern at Fat Quarter Shop, so you'll just download that. We'll talk about fabric requirements. You'll need 1 7/8 yard. This is used as your background and your inner border. The inside of the quilt is made with 2 1/4 yards of blue and 2 yards of red. That's your biggest part. Then you're going to have 4 pieces that you'll have 5/8 of a yard of, and those are for your outer border. We'll talk about binding and backing when we show you the final quilt, but for now, if you just want to pick 7 fabrics and follow the fabric requirements, we can get started. We're going to start with page 3 of the pattern. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is this pattern is more intermediate, but it's really going to accentuate stars and stripes, and you're going to love it in the end. I would just say take your time when you cut and take your time when you piece. We're going to start with flying geese. You're going to take 2 fabric B squares, and on the wrong side, you're going to draw a line from corner to corner. I like to use a friction pin because it disappears with heat. Then you're going to take a fabric L rectangle, and you're going to add a square to the left end like this. Now this flying geese is a tiny bit smaller than normal. So if you want, you could pin 3 times before you stitch on the line. Then you would leave your pins in, stitch on the line with an open toe foot, trim a 1/4 inch away, and then press according to the pattern. And then you'll do the same thing on the right end. And you just want to make sure you put those pins in and leave them in while you sew, stitch directly on the line, and press according to the pattern. For every star, you're going to make 4 of these. Since we're making 16 stars, you're going to make a total of 64 flying geese. Now you're going to take 4 fabric M squares and put those on the outside of your star. Place your flying geese with your points in the center and a fabric A square in the center. And then what you're going to do is sew these together with a 1/4 inch seam, press according to the pattern, and then add the last row, press according to the pattern. And then from there, you will sew together your last 2 seams. And this is what your star is going to look like. You're going to make 16, and for your best results, I would pin as you go, and you'll have really nice points. And the more accurate you pinned in this first step is the more accurate your points are going to be in this step. Now that we've made our red stars, right here we have half square triangles. Those are big and they'll be easy to piece. You're going to use 1 fabric F square and 1 fabric I square. What you'll do is you'll put those right sides together and then draw a line from corner to corner. I'm using a friction pin because it disappears with heat later. You can also draw lines a 1/4 inch away from that. You can either use a regular ruler or use the Creative Grids seam guide and just draw a line on each side. Then you're going to have 3 really dark lines. These 2 you're going to stitch on the outside lines right there. So that's how it looks when you stitch it. You can see your stitching lines right there. And when I stitched this, I added pins to the outside before I stitched so that nothing shifted. Then you'll take a ruler and trim right on that center line, and that is going to give you 2 half square triangles that are pretty big. Then you'll press these according to your pattern, and you will end up making 8 of these. and they should measure 7.5 inches square, which is the same size as your red stars. Now that we've made our red stars and our half square triangles, we need to make blue stars. You're going to use the same techniques as the first step, except you're going to be using different fabrics, and you will only be making 4 7.5 inch unfinished blue stars. Now we're still on page 3. You're going to lay out 4 of your red stars with 2 fabric J squares, your blue star in the top right, and your half square triangles here. You want to make sure that right here your blue is this way and your red is this way. Now I'm going to teach you a little bit about chain piecing, and you can use this technique with any type of quilt center that you're going to do. It could be super large, super small. I do this making blocks, but it's really great for quilt centers. So just like I said in the other parts, use lots of pins. We're going to first assemble this first and second column. So just pin, I'm going to do 3 times, once at the beginning, once at the end, and once at the middle on all 3 of these. So from here, I'll take a design board and lay them just like this, and then that way I know I'm going to stitch all the way down. So I'm going to use a 1/4 inch foot, and I'm going to stitch all the way down. When I go from block to block, I'm just going to keep sewing and have a chain in here. So let's do that, and don't cut your threads apart. Then we will iron. So you can see they're all chained together. Now you're going to press according to the pattern. Before I press, I'm going to set my seam. That just locks in your stitches. And I used Aurifil color 2600, which is a gray thread, because you've got really dark fabrics here. So if you used white, it might show up here, but if you use gray, it won't show up against the white thread. And then we'll go back to the cutting table, and I'm going to leave those chained together. Just make sure you've got it the right direction and your blue is still forming. And then you're going to flip these blocks right sides together and pin this entire column. And then from here, you can just pop this back on your design board, and you can see it's chained together. So you'll just keep this in your lap and start stitching. And again, just take a few stitches in between, and that's going to all be chained together. So you can see everything is chained together still. Then we're going to press according to the pattern. So here I still have everything all connected. I'm not going to cut those seams apart. And then right here, your threads are together. You just nest your seam just like this. Leave your thread just like it is. You don't cut it apart, and that makes it where you don't have to realign anything because everything's chain pieced together. As long as you lined it up correctly when you started, it should be correct now. And what you can do here is you can either sew this and then press, or you can just move this out of the way, move this, and pin the second side at the same time, again, not cutting anything apart. And you're going to be doing this for your quilt block, but you can use this technique when you're making smaller blocks. You can use this technique when you're putting together an entire quilt center. Even if it's like a queen size quilt, you can still use this technique no matter how small or how big. Then you just flip that other side out of the way and sew the other seam. Now from here, you might want to check to make sure your points line up right here, because you want to make sure that that is a nice diagonal. Make sure you don't chop off any of your flying geese points and everything looks good. And what I'll do is set the seam on one side, press according to the pattern, do the same thing on the other side. Now this has a lot of points, so I can tell everything did not iron flat. I could just feel that. So sometimes you have to press from the back to get it nice and flat. And this is how your block aligns, and you will be making 4 of these. Now that you've made 4 star blocks, you're going to turn to page 4, and you'll see that we have a unit on the right side and a unit on the top. And what that's going to do is that's going to turn your star block into a larger block that we call a pinwheel block, and that's going to extend that diagonal line that we started. So you're going to take a fabric E rectangle and a fabric K square. You're going to place it just like the pattern shows. Draw a line on the wrong side of your fabric K squares from corner to corner, and you're going to pin all along here and here. Stitch directly on that line, trim a 1/4 inch away, and press just like that. And this is going to be your first unit. You're going to make 4 of these, and these are the ones that go on the side. Then you're going to move to your fabric D rectangle, and this rectangle is much longer than your fabric E, so just make sure you're sewing on the right rectangle. The fabric D is larger. Then you're going to take another fabric K square, and that line on the back is already drawn from corner to corner. Same thing, lots of pins, stitch directly on that line, trim a 1/4 inch away, and press, and this will be your top unit. You will also make 4 of these. So now we've taken our star block, our side unit, and our top unit, and you can see that diagonal is really forming. And what you're going to do is sew these together, press, and add the top one. Now I'm going to show you how you make these points match, and you would do the same thing here and the same thing here, so that when you sew them together they match. So this seam right here, you can see this point is a 1/4 inch away from the edge. This one, I'm just going to take a ruler and draw a line a 1/4 inch away. Then I can see where that is. You could also do it on the back side, either one. Sometimes I do it on the front, sometimes I do it on the back. And you'll put this together. You're going to put your pin where that drawn line was in that 1/4 inch. Put your pin there, and then put that pin right in that intersection of that point, and then remove your pin and pin it right there. You'll also pin at the top and the bottom, but when you sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam and you press that, right there everything will line up. So you just need to make sure you pin in both of those intersections when you're putting together your pinwheel block. Okay, so now you're going to move to page 5, and you can see what we've done is you're going to put your 4 pinwheel blocks together just like this. And you can see this in the quilt we have right here. This is quilted, and basically you just want to line it up where you turn each block, where your blue forms that beautiful pinwheel. You can use that same technique to chain piece these 2 blocks to these 2 blocks, press, and then just sew that final seam. This comes out about 56.5 inches square. Just make sure you've got your red and your blue in the right spot. Now once you've got that together, you're going to add your side borders, which are your fabric C1s, and your top and bottom borders. Super easy, just use lots of pins. Once you've done that on page 6, you will follow all the instructions on page 7 for these top and bottom borders. Add those, and that is your quilt. So beautiful, lovely stars and stripes. Once you add this top border, if you wanted your quilt, for example, to be longer, you could just add more borders by adding more fabric. So you are able to lengthen the quilt with this if you want. And for binding, we put a really nice stripe on our binding and a dark fabric on the back. You can have lots of fun doing whatever fabrics you like. I even think a really nice red or white would look good on the back of this beautiful quilt. So right here, all of this stitching that you see is called a pantograph. That is your quilting that puts all of your layers together. The pantograph we chose is called red, white, and blue, which is super appropriate for the Quilts of Valor. And what we did is we used a slightly thinner white thread, and it's not too bright, it's not too light or too dark, and it blends really nice with your white, with your red, and with your navy. I think that looks really nice. Sometimes when you're quilting with lots of color changes, you just have to pick a thinner thread that has kind of a calm tone to it. This quilt is a great one to gift and great for Quilts of Valor. Now, it is more intermediate, but I know you can do it. Just take lots of breaks and use lots of pins. We hope you enjoy this free pattern. We hope you donate to Quilts of Valor, and I'll see you every Friday on my weekly live streams. See you there.